So my guest on the show today is author and former funeral home owner, Chris Meyer. Chris has written a really powerful new book. It's called Life in 20 Lessons, subtitled What a Funeral Guy Discovered About Life from Death.
Exactly.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm
It's
excited to
fun to be here. Yeah. It's
Good.
exciting.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have a great time because I'm so excited to talk with you about, the book. But what I'm really interested in talking about first of all is, if it's okay, if this isn't too nosy, how did you arrive at a life space where you were working in a funeral home in the first place?
Yeah.
I'm always so interested. Like,
It's a great story.
how did this person get in this place?
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
How?
So for me, I had I was an attorney in New York City, and I passed my bar, and I made a low budget film in New York. And once I made that film, I knew, oh, this is what I want to do for my life. I wanted to become a screenwriter.
Okay.
So I applied to a couple of festivals. I didn't get in. I went to a couple small festivals. I didn't get into Sundance, which is the big one. And I loaded up my film into my car and drove to LA. And I spent 11 years trying to be a screenwriter.
Wow.
Then my wife and I had our first child, and she's like, we got to do something because screenwriting wasn't paying the bills, and she was
Right.
working and she wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
And she had a friend in the family who had always said, he was a mortician,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, this is a steady business. If you ever need a steady business, let's do this together. And lo and behold, we did. And we found a funeral home that was on the cusp of bankruptcy, which was unusual. And I was more going to be the business side, and he was the mortician side. And that's how it came to be. I mean, it was really a happenstance, but it was a necessity, right? I was an attorney from New York. I was now in California. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to become an attorney. I knew that. I
Yeah.
had a new baby, and I was like, I have to do something. And we had to make some money for the family. So I think that good things happen when you're in that kind of situation. Like,
You're open. You're open to opportunities,
right.
right? I mean,
Well, I don't, you're not even open to it. You have to, it's a necessity, right? I
yeah.
mean, that's, to me, I think you said it best, right? You want to be open to everything and open to opportunity
Yeah.
all the time, I think, because I think that's when good things happen. But this was a necessity thing. And
Mm-hmm.
like I have explained in the book, maybe funeral home wasn't exactly the life choice that I was thinking about, but it was necessity, and I came to appreciate that. And
Yeah.
I knew that empathy was such a huge part of this, and I knew I
Sure.
was good at that. So
Well, so yeah, I mean, because when we first started talking about, I mean, first of all, I'm always curious, like, does this person have some like deep fascination with the dead people? We're going to
yeah,
cross that one off the list.
yeah,
That was not a
that was
motivator.
off the list.
But yeah, but I mean, so then like looking at it like, well, what's a good business? Like there's a car wash, there's a funeral home, and
Right,
you're like funeral home. But then I'm
right,
also hearing there was like another layer here, which was
right.
that there was something about it that felt like it could potentially be meaningful to
Yeah,
you.
and I think that came like at least a year or two in.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing was necessity, the second, and business. I thought it was a solid business, and I knew that I knew my work ethic, and I knew that I would make it
Yeah.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't almost so much of what was inside of me, but it was going home and seeing this little boy and seeing
Yeah.
his blue eyes looking up at me and say, "Hey, Dad, what's this all about?" And I was so enamored with how good a mom my wife was,
Mm-hmm.
that was really the impetus for me. I knew that I
Right.
had to just grind, get it done. And as I was there longer and longer, I was like, wow, this is very powerful stuff here. You're really at such a turning point in, everyone's life, right? It's one of those seminal moments when you're losing a loved one that we
Yeah.
all remember and we all have to go through, unfortunately. And I think that's when, a couple years in, you're like, wow, this is way more powerful than I had any idea.
Yeah. Well, take us into that. I mean, clearly you got a lot out of this experience and were able to kind of wring a lot of wisdom and life lessons that you put in your book. But I'm curious to know, and if it's okay to ask, I don't know like what kind of confidentiality there might
No,
be in
you're
this
good.
situation, but like, are there families or people that you interacted, within the first few years that kind of changed things for you, where you began thinking, this is powerful?
Yeah, and I think it was so frequent
Mm,
that that was
yeah.
the thing for me is, I think in the funeral industry, you're getting families in this crisis every day, right? And I think I think you can go two ways, right? You could
Hmm.
start drinking at 10 o'clock in the morning to get,
It's a strategy. Yeah.
or
Uh-huh.
you could be just so super thankful and grateful for everything and listen to what they're telling you, because the people are there and they're talking and they need to get it out. It's sort of this mini catharsis for them, right? To get it off their chest
Yeah.
and say, they would like almost look at me as a friend and say, Chris, listen, your children are tiny once. Go coach everything, go be at every opening, go to every school play,
Mhm.
walk in the park, do all those things because they're small ones. And for me, those were, hearing that sort of recidivist same
Mhm.
lines over and over again. I started thinking, A, these people are right? Because they're living it. But B, I was like, I've got to put this down because, this is the kind of thing that people don't think about until you're in crisis, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a little different because I wanted to write a book on the positive side of it, right?
Mhm.
It's just not, this for me is not a death and dying book. I mean,
Mhm.
Kubler-Ross wrote the landmark book in this case, and that's not what I'm writing. I'm trying to spin it the other way, right? I'm trying to
Yeah.
say, I've seen it. These are the lessons. Just read it because your life is gonna be different, and that's what you should go about your life very differently than we all do. We all worry about too many things that are sort of ancillary and periphery that is not necessary, because at the ultimate, at the end, it's really just your family who's going to be there, right? And that to me was like sort of the powerful takeaway.
That is really interesting too, and I want to talk more about that. But so I think I'm hearing it's like you were sort of like the second person that these people talk to. Like there was like the doctor at the hospital
Right.
saying this isn't going to work out, and then they're there with you, and it's like they were just broken open and had all of these amazing realizations about like what mattered, what didn't, and you were the recipient
Yeah.
of all of
And they're
this.
super raw, right? And
Oh
like you said,
yeah.
they generally their lack of sleep, lack of food,
Yeah.
maybe drank too much, they're
Mhm.
just ready to rip and talk about it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
you don't want to be there just to get the job done, because that to me, that's where I thought we were different. I thought
Yeah.
just chill, listen, be that ear that people need,
Right.
because they needed to talk.
Of
And yeah, it
course.
was, like I said, that 2 to 3 years in, it started opening up a whole new world for me. And I was just like
Yeah.
thinking about life very differently. Yeah.
Well, and that is exactly why I was really excited about talking to you on this podcast. I mean, in general, but also, we're recording this interview at the time of year that people are going to be getting ready to think
Right.
about, resolutions and life goals. And, I'm hoping to have this kind of be floated out into the universe, like, maybe early January. And like what you're saying, I mean, you just literally said the things that we think matter don't actually matter. So, like when we're talking about life goals and what am I doing with my life kinds of things, it sounds like have a really important message.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, that's very natural to stress about. We all stress about how we're going to pay the bills or how we're going to
Yeah.
pay rent or how we're going to do that. And I mean, I think the big takeaway is probably it all works out. Don't worry. You do have to do the work. Look,
Yeah.
there's that. But I think it's such, for me, I had a child. I knew my wife wanted, and I wanted more. And we started having children. And I was just like, I know families are are always thinking about how to keep up with the Joneses, right? That's the sort of the big takeaway in suburbia. You know, you want to just kind of get on that habit trail and just like
Mm-hmm.
comp soccer and, you know, make sure the kids are in gymnastics class. And it's like
Yeah.
what I found, and for me, the most profound thing is that the children don't want all the gifts that you think they want. They want you on the carpet at their eye level,
Mm-hmm.
looking into their eyes, right? And feeling that they matter.
Yeah.
They don't need 17 toys. They really don't. I think we think they do. And I think there's this whole marketing thing
Mm-hmm.
in America and the world, really, that pushing presents on kids, they don't want that. They want time. They want
Mm-hmm.
to hold your hand and go for a walk. They want you to play toys with them on the floor. It's so
Mm-hmm.
simple. It
Yeah.
really is so simple. And I don't know. I'm trying to get like a throwback in America and even the world.
Mm-hmm.
Just let's go back to simpler times and just connect, more connection. Get off of these things. I mean, this is the bane of our
Chris says,
existence.
holding up a phone.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
It performs a great function, but if we can put that down for a while and just have that face-to-face and that eye
Yeah.
connection, again, that's another one of my big things, especially with children and especially with the elderly.
Mm-hmm.
They want to look in your eyes and they want to feel like someone cares. Like, you know, that's what to me is the good stuff.
Yeah.
And again, it's lessons that families repeatedly told me, and they were like, don't overcomplicate this, Chris. It's not that complicated, you know?
Yeah.
And I wish, you know, Bert or whoever it was knew that, you know?
So
That's a
like
lot.
I totally agree. And like what you're saying, I think is what we know, you know, but it is so easy for all of us, I think, to get like buy in to this idea that we're being good parents by providing things for our children, which then requires heroic, you know, work, business stuff that then, you know, paradoxically takes us away from our children and deprives them of what they matter most. I mean, it's very easy to spiral down that particular
Yeah,
drain.
and honestly, it's us. We all have to be stronger. There's a
Yeah.
cataclysmic imbalance in this world, and that needs to be changed. We have to be stronger within ourselves. We have to turn off the outside marketing machine, and we just have to do us, right? And I'm sure you say that to your clients all the time. You know, you don't have to be this superwoman or superman, right? Just be you. And keep it small. I'm all about keeping it way smaller than we need. We all think we need way more than we do. Guaranteed.
Okay. So that, and I have some other questions for you, but I'm going to save that because right now I have like 75 different things I want to ask you more about. So I'm making a note of that one. But going back a little bit. So you're sitting there with Bert's wife, and this happened, you know, like 150 different times. And what it sounds like the message that you were getting, the big ones, were it's time that you spend with people, and it's also family. I heard you say a couple minutes ago that the only thing that really matters at the end is family.
Who's going to be there?
Say a little more about that.
Well, again, one of my famous term, it's infamous, not really now, it's become a familionaire, right? I love that, right?
I haven't heard
millionaire, a family millionaire.
Okay.
Right? Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
So that's what I believe. So I grew up in Westchester County, New York. My parents are second generation German immigrants. Both sides of my family, really strong grandparents who were involved in our lives and were there a lot, especially my mother's father, who was sort of my best friend growing up. And they just, you know, they came from another world to here.
Yeah.
And think about that heroism, right? And how scary that must have been to leave everyone behind. And especially in my grandfather's situation, he would just constantly preach to me. I was the youngest of three boys, and he would come to everything of mine, every sports game, and just sit there in a lawn chair. And you know, everyone knew him. He was a local celebrity. but he would just constantly preach to me, Chris, the only thing that matters is this, is just you and me and mom and your brothers, you know. And I get emotional. The guy's been gone for
Oh.
probably another, 10 years already.
Hmm.
But I hear that a lot,
Yeah.
I hear that in my head a lot.
Hmm.
And it means such a great deal to me because I just know what's coming, and what's the point, And I think it's really important to memorialize everyone in that way. Like with my grandfather and me, he was a real outdoorsman. He used to, his family owned a lumber yard, and he would go into the woods and cut lumber down and pull it out.
Hmm.
And so, like, for me, when I go for a walk in the morning and I'm outside in
Hmm.
the trees, like, that's when I feel him. And to me, that's the good stuff,
Yeah.
that's what I love. And
Hmm.
I'm just trying, you can't, you want the rest of the world to see that, and it's hard. So
Hmm.
I think the book is just like a small piece, to a reminder for
Yeah.
people, pick
Hmm.
it up if they want it. But I know what's important, and I know what matters to me. So the family is everything, really.
Yeah, yeah, and that time and that energy and effort that he put into you and your life and building that connection with you
Yeah.
and what he taught you. And what I also heard, which is so awesome, is that that connection endures. Even though you lost him 10 years ago, and I'm sorry for that, you still very much feel that he's part of your life. He's there, and he's also influencing clearly.
Yeah, and it's really important to have that, especially in the funeral industry, to have that experience because,
Hmm.
it's totally organic. And I would share that with people who were just losing people, right?
Yeah.
So I would tell them my story of my
Hmm.
grandfather and how it impacts me. And although there is the permanence of death, he comes to me, I don't want to sound too hoo-ha, too
Yeah.
spiritual or anything, but for me, that's the way it happens,
Yeah.
and it doesn't leave me. And I do hear him talking sometimes.
Mm.
And I know that all sounds crazy and hoo-ha-ish,
It doesn't.
but I think you have to understand what gets you through your day or what gets me through my day might be very different.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a very Lutheran, going to church every Sunday, really nice, lot of music. And then when I hit 18, I never went to church again in my life, which is interesting. But I do have that teaching, and
Hmm.
I do now have this sort of profound spirituality based on being in the funeral industry. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I always say I've gotten so much more than I've given by being in the industry, and I feel grateful. I really
Yeah.
do.
I can understand that. Yeah. And also you're saying that even though sometimes when we make investments in time or in relationships, there isn't that immediate like reward. It's not numbers adding up an account or something like quantifiable in the same way, but that really is at the end of the day what endures,
Oh,
ironically. Yeah.
that is a great statement because it is you think that the impact of what you're doing might not have an effect, but
Hmm.
a perfect example is a former coach who taught me when I was in fifth, sixth, and seventh grade. And I remember him to this day. He has since passed, and I write about him in the book, about the profound effect that he had on my life, because I look back on it and I remember him pulling up in a car, getting out of his work clothes, putting on a t-shirt and coming out to teach us kids, and how much I appreciated that. I saw what he was going through, and he inspired me to do that with my children. And I have had this wonderful 9-year run with my middle son's basketball team, and I've had them since they're kindergarten, and now they're in eighth
Oh,
grade.
how
So I've gotten
awesome.
to be with them for these 9 years, and I know they don't understand it now, but 20 years from now, they're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, that was fun," because I know what I feel, and
Hmm.
at least that's what I hope. you know.
Yeah, that's
So
really
the
cool.
enduring human spirit, or the inspiration that you pulled from that,
Yeah,
it's profound. It really is.
well, definitely. So, and I'm also wondering if you can say a little bit more about, and I don't know exactly how to ask this, but here's what I'm thinking of right now. I don't know if you're familiar with like Carlos Castaneda, he was a writer,
Sure.
like, and he talked about how there's a lot of wisdom that can be taken from the specter of death, right? When we're conscious of the end, it makes our life in the present more intentional in some ways. And I'm wondering if, over the course of the years that you worked in a funeral home, if you also sat with people and learned from people who perhaps made different choices than the things that we are talking about, and were able to share their understanding of that in retrospect was a mistake, not so that we can all kind of take wisdom from it. And just personal disclosure, I had the amazing opportunity to once work with a man who I'd known for a long time as a client, but wound up getting esophageal cancer, and he died. And so, we had an established relationship, but then kind of walked with him through the end. And he said some really powerful things to me about some of the things that he regretted the most, and those stayed with me. I'm curious to know if you've had some of those messages too.
Yeah, I think, you know, I was infrequently involved in the journey up to the end.
Mm.
I was more with the families who maybe regretted a lifestyle or choices that someone maybe had made
Like what?
because they were, just rougher lifestyles or bad, traditionally, or drugs or
Yeah,
alcohol
okay. Mm.
choices, or waywardness, just away from the family and not being involved, or their own guilt of not like reaching out more. I mean, I think the greatest thing that we could take away also is that all families have something, right? All families
Yes.
are in some way in crisis. There is an estranged
Mhm.
brother, an estranged sister. It is across the board. No
Yeah.
one is immune. The most religious until the least religious, all socioeconomic, everything. That
Hmm.
no one gets away with a free pass. And I think that for me was also very interesting, because you think that, oh my gosh, my family, my father has an estranged relationship with a brother.
Hmm.
And you're like, every more and more you're in it, you're hearing every story, and everyone is like, oh, we all have that.
Hmm.
So I think that for me was just like, I, I think what I'm hearing you say, and what was certainly powerful for me, was that, why? Just go, take them out to lunch, sit and talk and get it out.
Yeah.
Because what's the point? I mean,
Hmm.
if you generally don't want a relationship with that person, I get it, fine.
Hmm.
But it's so much wasted time and
Yeah.
so much energy put into something that just doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's just a misunderstanding, and a lot of times they want to be back in the fold just as much as you want them back in the fold, right?
Right, right. So to be compassionate and merciful, and like
Yes,
let things go. That connection at the end of the day is really what's more important, not necessarily the way that connection happens.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So much good stuff here. So, I mean, we've talked about important things like there's family, the simple power of time and being present, letting things go. What are some of the other lessons that
Well,
you
I
wrote
think,
about in your book?
yeah, I think one of the other great things more for the younger people is failure, and how good that is in your life, and how we tend to think of failure as this life event, and we always make more of failure than is necessary. And I always align my later in life, I align myself with sort of the people who are out there in society. And I think the people who are successful, I think there is so much failure in the successful people's lives that they don't talk about, that I wish we could have this whole open show on failures, because they are the building blocks for success,
That's
right?
a great
And,
idea.
and if you don't fail, that means you're stagnant. And so I'm trying to teach my kids, get out there, try something. If it doesn't work, boom, great. One block down. Go
Hmm.
ahead, keep going. Failure, boom. And just use them as building blocks.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is just the greatest lesson in this, short bit of adulthood that I wish I knew, back when I was 20. Because
Hmm.
we think, oh, I need to graduate from college, and then I need to go to med school, or,
Hmm.
whoa, just get out there in the world, keep pounding, try a couple things, and keep moving. You're
Yeah.
building every day.
Yeah.
And it's hard because sort of after you leave college or high school, there's no guidance counselor, right? There's no cheerer. Your parents maybe, but you always have that sort of antiseptic view to your parents' advice.
Sure.
But that's why I think, reading is so good, because you
Hmm.
find little nuggets from people that are objective, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just wish more people would not make a big deal of failure and just keep
Right.
going.
Learning, growing, and that
Learning.
failing is absolutely a part of that, and that it's good to take risks and
Right.
not be attached to an outcome, because it's all
No,
valuable.
no,
Yeah.
it's so great. And it's
Hmm.
such an important thing for the youth to understand and know.
Right.
We need to change the meaning of failure in the lexicon of the world,
Right.
right? I mean, it needs to be like, all right, I'm trying. That's good.
Hmm.
I failed, but that's okay. I'm keep going.
Yeah.
So
And I'm
that
curious
was,
to know. I mean, when you were sitting with families, at the end, um, is that a message that came out, or could you see, sort of like looking back, the trajectory of someone's life who did try things and take a few in the face and get back up again, versus people who didn't?
yeah,
What did
all
you
the time,
see? What did you
all the
see?
time. I mean, I think unfortunately you saw the people that just got beaten down and took the failure as like
A
some
statement.
greater scope. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then just went off. And that's why it's the
Went
more we
went
can sort of,
off
yeah,
and like
well, just went off
stopped.
the rails,
Ah.
just couldn't recover from that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, whatever it is, think about it. If it's a job, if it's a relationship,
Yeah.
if it's money, there's always more of all of those things, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
more people in the world to make a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
There are more jobs certainly in the world. You might have to start parallel or a little lower, but you can always,
Mm-hmm.
and money you can always be made.
Yeah.
It's so simple, and I
Mhm.
think we have to get the perception out of our heads, and we just have to get like, you have to put like blinders on and just keep going, because
Mhm.
I think it's the people that say, oh, that man, I just lost that job. Well, I mean,
Mhm.
there's thousands of other jobs, and they want good people, and they want people who are honest and who will work hard.
Yeah.
If you got that, it's the world is your oyster.
Well, yeah, and I think, I'm thinking of like one of the central messages that my client who was dying said over and over to me was this sense, at the end, that he had run out of time. And I
Yeah,
think what you're saying is that when you have time, when you have life, when you have health, all things are possible. But at the
everything.
end, that's when you stop having second chances and do-overs. And so to make use of that time to get back up, get another job, repair a relationship, invest in something meaningful, because at the end, that's you lose that option.
Yeah, I mean, the famous saying is, you can't buy more of that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we all work so hard,
Hmm.
and at the end, you can't say, "Hey, I want another 20 years. Here's $1 million." You can't
Right.
do that. There's no, and so what your client was saying was very profound, and again, yet so simple.
Hmm.
You're not going to have.
Yeah.
We're all here for a finite amount of time, and it's short when you think about it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the crazy thing. And that, I heard day in day out. But We
Yeah.
all know it, and we just sometimes don't want to think about that.
You don't think about it.
Don't think about that. And the honesty is, it could happen tomorrow. You know, you could be driving in a car. That's you. Again, it sounds so trite to say that. Live like that, but you should have that in your mind. I think it's so simple, and it's
But
so easy to do. And it's like,
yeah.
do I like what I'm doing right now? And is this how I want to spend 8 to 10 hours a day? For me, I've been very lucky. I've always kind of thought that way. And
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a funeral business, and in the funeral business, I started getting loans, and then I started thinking there's a different way to get loans. So I created something
Mm-hmm.
else with a friend. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly thinking, what excites me? What makes me want to get up in the morning? I always want to, I'm in the funeral business. I'm like, these would be a great book for people to read. I've got
Mm-hmm.
to do this. And, it took, 5, 6 years, but I put it down on paper, and I really feel like I can help people. So
Yeah.
it's always, for me, I just want to find out what's the next thing, what excites me, what's going to
Right.
make me want to get off that pillow and just,
Mm-hmm.
keep going and try something new.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's exciting.
No, and I totally hear that. And I think, I'm not sure how old you are. We're probably around the same
Yeah, I'm
vintage,
54.
I'm guessing. Oh, okay. Well, but still. So, for me, 9/11,
Yeah.
such a terrible tragedy. And just, I can so relate to what you're saying about, like, it could happen tomorrow, because
Yes.
unfortunately we lost my cousin in 9/11, and
Wow. In New
young,
York?
smart. Yes, he was in at the top of that tower. That's where he worked.
So
And
was my
and
neighbor at the
Cantor
top,
Fitzgerald.
a bond trader at the top of the building.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was exactly that moment. I was in my 20s at the time. It was like, holy crap. Like, just the thought that somebody could just be taken out, like so many people. And that is actually the reason that you and I are here talking today, is because of exactly what you're saying. It's like, if that could happen at any moment, what am I doing?
Right.
Like, what feels important, what feels meaningful. And for me, it was, how can I be helpful to people?
Yeah.
And that was like the total launch of, like, going to counseling school and everything. And so, like, what you're saying is so powerful. And for people to just, like, take a few minutes, and as they're thinking about their goals or their next chapter, like, what is this really
Right.
about for you?
Right.
Big picture,
Yeah. And I think 9/11 did it for a
Yeah.
lot of
A
people
lot of
in
people.
sort of that,
Hmm.
20, 30-year span. It was
Yeah.
just like you said, it had never happened on our soil, and we
Right.
saw how vulnerable anyone is.
Completely.
And, generally you have someone in your life who in some way was touched by
Hmm.
9/11. My brother-in-law was in the Pentagon when it got
Oh
hit, and we
boy.
were all
Hmm.
freaking out. And then, one of our neighbors at my parents' house, we lost him. And
Yeah.
what an amazing, they're just, when you see, when people, right?
Yeah.
And how much they loved life and their families. And
Right.
like, for me, I saw George all the time at my parents'
Hmm.
house. He was such a cool guy. He was a bond trader. He loved his children. He was just living the good life. He was, he would walk around my parents' house, and they were just a good human being
Yeah.
having the time of his life.
Right.
And I say again, you and I must be on the same wavelength. I talk about that in the book. All George did that day was get on the train in Westchester and go to work,
Yeah.
right?
Just
And he
show
had
up.
done that probably since he was 20 years old.
Yeah.
How did he know that would change? And yeah, so that for me, and like I said, many of us in the
Yeah.
country
Yeah.
changed our collective conscious. I hope we're reminded as
Hmm.
we should be of it. Yeah.
Completely. But I mean, such a powerful lesson there around, getting clarity and meaning. What are there other lessons that kind of came to you as you were writing through the book, and really sort of like sifting through, what were the most important things that I learned from people who had run out of time?
Yeah. I think, for me, it's just we are tend to take life more serious than it has to be.
Mm,
And I think it's just, you know, it's the pursuit of the smaller things. And again, just hearkening back to family.
yeah.
That for me, it was just so clear as day that almost to a family, it was about time, like you said, right?
Yeah.
And getting back to basics and
Hmm.
enjoying meals together. And the holidays are always thing, but why is it just the holidays? Let's get together more often.
Yeah.
And it was doing those things. For me, the lessons were always, I felt like they were almost instructive to me about my being with my children, right? So
Hmm.
that was the greatest reminder. And I always say the greatest gift for me, it was this absolute meeting of me needing something out of necessity to provide for my family, and me starting a family. It
Yeah.
was just at the absolute exact time.
Hmm.
2005, I entered the funeral business. In 2004, my son was born. So
Hmm.
it was like, and then
Yeah.
I had two more sons while I was in it. And I said to you earlier, you could go one of two ways: start drinking at 10 to dull in the pain, or be
Hmm.
grateful. And I would go home and I would be like thankful to be home. And I would just spend the time with those boys growing up. And
Yeah.
that was the greatest thing for me. And that has been the greatest thing from the funeral
Yeah.
industry.
Well, and how for you too. I mean, you had this family, but then also were in a business that pushed you back into the arms of that family in a very real way, day after day, as
Right.
opposed
And
to
it was
so many
reinforcing
people
it.
who,
It was on a daily
yeah,
basis. It was just,
yeah,
you're doing the right thing. Go ahead, keep
yeah.
going. This is it. This is where the good stuff is.
Well, and this actually brings us back to one of the questions that I had for you. I was thinking earlier, but this is probably a good time. So clearly, you strike me as an ambitious person. I mean, there was law school, there's starting a business, you've gone on to do other things in the financial world. So as a fellow ambitious person, and for all of our listeners who are, often really like go-getters and hardworking people, and they have big, hairy, audacious goals, um, how how have you figured out the balance between chasing after pretty big goals,
Yeah.
but also balancing that with the central message, which is keep it small, don't overreach, don't try to do everything in the universe, and have like that your life should be built around, your time with your family and really your life style in the sense of those relationships, while also, I'm guessing, probably working really hard and building successful businesses, because that takes a lot of energy. It really
Lot of
does.
energy. And I think
Yeah.
the most important thing to reveal from that
Hmm.
is I don't have balance. It's hard.
Me
And it's
neither.
difficult. And I think it's just, you always tend to look at someone and say, oh, wow, how do they do all that? Everyone has something.
Mhm.
I don't sleep as much as I probably should.
Yeah.
My mind is constantly going. That
Hmm.
works for me, at least I think on some level. I make sure that I have exercise and I want to be here. But you tend to, I read something, I don't know, back in the day, it was like Stephen Covey or one of these guys.
Yeah.
You have more time in the day than you realize. And I think it's just how you use that time in the day. And
Mm.
I thought that was so, again, simple, but profound, because, look, I'm as guilty as the next guy. On Sunday, I watch a lot of football, but
Mhm.
I think that, you don't need to watch the TV at night, and you can read a book
Yeah.
and you can write a book. It doesn't have to be this chunk of time. This is when I'm doing it. You do it in small chunks.
Yeah.
You build on those small chunks. And I think that, to me, is a great, great lesson. You definitely have more time than you realize. We waste a lot of time in our lives.
Yeah.
Everyone is different. I don't know what works for you, and you can't know what works for me. And all of our styles are very different. And I
Hmm.
think we tend to like look and say, I want to know the answer to how do I, do the life? Or and I read Tim Ferriss and I read Gary Vaynerchuk and, all these things. You got to make what works for you and what fits into your lifestyle,
Yeah.
how that works. Does that make you happy?
Mm-hmm.
And it's different for everyone. There is no, here's the game plan, go
Yeah.
be successful. It doesn't work
Well,
like
but that in itself though is really great advice, is that really think about you and your life and what you want. And I think if we like tie this back to the big ideas that we're talking about, and what I am guessing is probably how you've been living, is in a very intentional way, thinking about what is important, what excites me, what energizes me, what feels meaningful to me, and that there's a few things there, clearly family, but then finding ways of also fitting meaningful work around that central idea. And
that. I think
maybe,
you said it best.
and that looks different for different
Yeah,
people.
and I
Yeah.
think you know it better probably than anyone, right? There's anxiety that comes along with that.
Yeah.
There is sleeplessness that comes along with that. There
Mhm.
is problems that come along. It's not easy. It's
No.
not. And
It's not.
everyone tends to think, oh, look at, he's a billionaire and no one gets away unscathed and everyone is different, the life they lead.
Yeah.
So don't compare yourself, right? We tend to
Yeah.
do that all the time. Oh man, I wish I was like that guy or that
Mhm.
woman, and it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Everyone has anxiety. I certainly have sleepless nights.
Mm-hmm.
I have, periods when I'm not eating properly or exercising properly. And I think you just have to listen to that internal barometer
Yeah.
that says, whoa, I got to
Yeah.
steer left a little bit and get back on the rails there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's, it's that white noise that we all listen to in society. And we spoke earlier about it with the marketing thing and
Mm-hmm.
telling us we need things that we just do not need.
Yeah, but that's great advice in itself though. Like, I mean, time is so limited and any of us can only really do a few things. And even with those few things, there is a trade-off, like we cannot actually do everything all the time. And so
For
to be
sure.
really, really, really selective about what gets your attention and intention, and like making it count.
Yeah.
That's a good takeaway right there.
Yeah, for sure.
And
You got to remember yourself also, right? I mean, that's the thing. We
yeah.
we tend to, and probably in your business more than anything, you're trying to help people and listen to them, but there is that time that you've got to step away and do
Hmm.
you for a while.
Yeah.
Get out, go for a walk, get your exercise, have a
Right.
nice meal, whatever it is that you know
Hmm.
centers you or clears your brain.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially as parents, we forget that, right? We tend to forget our spouse. Tend to forget ourselves.
Yeah.
And again, it's hard. It's not easy,
Mhm.
but you need to take care of you a little bit too. There has to be a portion of your day
Right.
that is your time. And I think that's
Completely.
be with self is kind of what the chapter in the book. So
Yeah. Yeah. That if you're not taking care of yourself and investing in your health and your mental and emotional well-being, you're no good to anyone, really. I
sure,
mean, you
for
can't do
sure.
any of it. Okay. And now one question too that has been kind of floating around in the back of my mind. We're talking about a lot of these things, as is frequent on the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast, from a relational view. We're talking, family and kids and spouses. But I had a listener actually reach out to me recently about another podcast that I did, and she's like, Lisa, as a single person, this not all of this relates. I struggle a little bit to like apply some of these ideas to my life. So let's say there's a hypothetical, you know, late 30s, early 40s, something year old woman who has not married and doesn't have kids and maybe has a nice career, has a friend group, but might not marry. There's some people don't want to do that. I mean, there are many different ways of going about this. I mean, do you have any thoughts or ideas for people who maybe don't have kids, or whose parents have passed, and what What are your thoughts about that?
So the advice from me is hard because
Hmm.
that was never me. And I totally understand that some people do make that choice. And I think that you have to, we talk about it a lot in America, that, I talk about family and being with family, but family has grown so much in our world. And I encompass friends in that. And I
Yeah.
think you have to create that family. If you don't have one, you
Hmm.
create that with the friendships that you have. And I think that's really important. I talk about having a few vital friends. You don't have to have these massive
Yeah.
groups, right? I think it's really important. I happen to be very lucky. I have this friend from law school who we talk 5 times a week. He's
Wow,
in
that's
Maine,
awesome.
I'm in California, but there is something there that it's more of a family, more of a
Yeah.
brotherhood. And I think that to establish some sort of connection like that, to have
Hmm.
that friendship, whether it's even from a church or a group, it doesn't necessarily have to be family. We all sometimes get tied up. Oh, I don't have any family. I'm an orphan
Hmm.
or this or that. You have to create that. And I
Yeah.
think that you don't have to create that, but that if that's something that you're desirous of, there are people out there that are in a similar situation. And I think that's important for a long, healthy life. I
Hmm.
think to have someone to bounce ideas off of, even if it's not relationship
Hmm.
in the terms of intimacy, in terms of, like you said, getting it off your mind, bouncing ideas off of. And for John and I, to me, it's invaluable because I talk to
Yeah.
him about business. I talk about wives, kids, my family. I talk about everything. And it's very, very cathartic to
Right.
be able to just have sort of this objective person who's not a family member,
Hmm.
who just, takes me warts and all, and
Yeah.
also knows if I'm trying to game the system, right? They
Calls
call
you
you.
on your
And
stuff.
I think that's important too, because
Hmm.
you don't want that yes person in your life.
Right.
That gets a little squirrely too, right? You want
Yeah.
that objective person that says, "Come on, man,
Hmm.
is this really a
No,
big deal?"
but I love that message is that, if that, if, and I like the way you qualified it, if in your, personal inventory you discover that having high quality connections is important to you, there are a lot of ways of creating them. There are friendships, but also I like that you mentioned that any of us are really lucky to have like a few
Yeah.
really good, like count on one hand, like those kinds of friends.
Right, but don't you
And it
feel like
also takes
society tells us
time.
we need more?
Oh no, I mean, geez, I struggle with social media, and thankfully I'm surrounded by very smart, like 27-year-olds who tell me what to do in that area. But like, there's so much like likes and followers and like stuff, and gosh, but like, I mean, really, like I have a few really good friends,
Yeah.
but also going back to your point, it takes a lot of time to
Yeah.
cultivate that, like over many, many years,
Yeah.
and having like time for phone conversations and like and so that these things are built. And I love the way you're saying too. I mean, don't compare yourself to what other people are doing, or these ideas about what you should have or be or do, because it's really like your own creation. And at the end of the day, at the end of your life, it's going to be what actually mattered to me and the people that
Yeah.
I love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hold hands.
Yeah.
My grandfather just loved to hold hands and go for
Oh,
walks, and
how
I know
sweet.
my kids do that. Even as crazy as our lives are, and they're on their iPads, and I'm sitting here on the couch with them. But sometimes I just reach over and hold their hands.
Hmm.
For me, that visceral touch,
Yeah.
you could feel it shoot through your arm up into your heart and brain. And
Mm.
the simplicity the joy that I get from just doing that. I mean, I just did it yesterday. We're
Hmm.
watching here football. We're fantasy football crazy kids over here, 3 boys, and my wife, is going to yoga. And I just reach over and hold my son's hand, and I feel better. I just feel better. And I really talk about this again in the book. It's like the elderly need that. They need to be held. They need their hold their hand and talk to them, and
Mhm.
you know, get in their mind and look in their eyes. That means so much, that touch. And we have gotten so far away. We've gotten to become this antiseptic gel society,
Mhm.
you know, for what?
Right.
Just go back. Know how it feels when you hold someone's hand and just track the feeling. That's what I always say. Track the feeling in your brain and body when it happens. It's so powerful. It's crazy powerful.
It is.
And it go, the yogis all know that, right? And they're all about this, getting in touch with yourselves. But man, there's something there. There
Yeah.
really is.
That sense of connection. And I know I have an 11-year-old son, and every once in a while he'll still like hold my hand when we're walking. But I think now, like, I wonder how long this is gonna last, like one of these days he's gonna anyway. But also I think another really powerful message and takeaway is that our efforts to reach out to other people matter, and that to have an effort on your part to connect in meaningful ways to other people, especially other people who might be lonely or who might not have that many people that are there for them, like, that is so powerful, not just for them, but also I think, when we're talking about what gives any of our lives meaning and purpose, like that, like, I think you started this conversation off by saying, I got more than I gave
Oh,
being in this position. And I think that that's
tenfold,
true for any of us when we try
millionfold.
to do that, and in a genuine way, like, be there for other people and help them. It comes back, doesn't
It, it does. And I think I'll tell one more story,
it? Yeah.
but it was, I had the privilege of picking people up when they were passed and deceased. And
Mm.
I have been in, I can't tell you how many countless convalescent homes and care homes
Mm.
and all levels of care.
Yeah.
And I have walked into places where elderly are lining the walls because it's quote unquote exercise time. And they're outside of their rooms, all facing each other as far as the hallway will see. You talk about tragic. I always say, where are these people's families? They need to have their hand held. They need to be looked in the eye, go outside. It's unbelievable the way we treat elderly in America. I think
Mhm.
that the Europeans, the Japanese, all these people revere the elderly and keep them in your home, and they're part of the family, and there's wisdom and all that. I just think that we need to get to that. I keep saying, I know we need to
Mm.
get back to these situations, but I think other societies are just more evolved than us, quite frankly. I'm not about building more care homes. I'm about bringing family members, elderly, into your home. And it's
Yeah.
hard. Don't get me wrong. It is really, really difficult.
Mhm.
And there becomes a level of care that, you can't care for them anymore. And
Yeah.
I'm just a massive advocate for having elderly with the youth because it benefits them and
Mhm.
it teaches the youth the greatest thing you could ever have, and that's empathy.
Mm.
If you have empathy for another human being,
Mhm.
your life, you will go through life successful. I guarantee that.
Yeah.
That that feeling of that's going to be me in 40 years, you got it. If you can teach
Ugh.
a child that,
Yeah.
forget it. Forget it. It's over. We will succeed. We will succeed.
Yeah.
The that is gonna be me. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I think I was privileged to have that with my grandfather. I saw him age and have the Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
and oh man, if you could just show people, show
Mhm.
people those convalescent homes, there would be a change in the world.
Yeah. Wow, what a powerful story, and how those connections endure as people are, walking into the night. I'm I have like things coming up from my family.
I know. You
We
never
could
said
talk a
that.
long time. This
I
is
can tell. I
yeah,
can
but
tell.
yeah, but but the other thing, just my I'm actually a first generation American. I'm Belgian, and my grandmother lived with us growing up because that's just the way you did things, right? And but there did come a time when she her mind failed, and just like thinking about her, and she lived into her 90s, but like thinking about what that was like, and how um to stay connected to people as they almost like kind of that old story about like returning into infancy in some
Right? It's
ways,
the circle of
and
life.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Disney made a whole movie about
Hmm.
it. But it's so true. It's so true. We, as the elderly,
Yeah.
as we go from this, sort of powerful leaders of our family, and then they start to become infirm, they really
Hmm.
do. They regress
Yeah.
back into infancy, and that's
Hmm.
truly the circle of life. And
Mm.
again, it sounds hokey to talk about it, but
It's
I'm a
not.
pragmatist, and
Yeah.
um, you know, it, there's nothing more profound than to witness that.
Hmm.
At least for me, there wasn't.
So many powerful takeaways from our
Yeah.
conversation today, Chris. I feel like I could talk to you for so much longer, but I don't want to take
Maybe
more
we
valuable.
will.
Well, no, really, I'd love to keep in touch with me as you write. I'm sure you'll do more amazing things. But to summarize these takeaways is really like getting clear about your values and what is meaningful and important to you. And for a lot of people, that common thread is investing in relationships and spending time and figuring out how to stay connected and less focused on things that ultimately take you away from people
For
that you
sure. For sure.
great
I'm
advice.
grateful for the time. So thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
this was wonderful. So again, this is a very powerful book. If anybody is interested in picking it up, the book is called Life in 20 Lessons: What a Funeral Guy Discovered About
Good. Oh, it's
Life
called promo right here.
from Death. Good stuff. Chris Meyer. His website is chrismeyerauthor.com, and I'm sure the book is widely available on
Yes.
Amazon and
Amazon everywhere.
usual suspects. Well,
Yeah. Thank you
Chris,
for having me.
this was wonderful. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I hope you keep in touch with me as
I
your
certainly will.
story evolves. Okay.
Yes.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. I
Okay.
really enjoyed it. I think you're very good at what you do, obviously. So thank you for the time. It was great. It really was.
I
It's interesting that it brings out some emotions in me just talking about things like my
oh,
grandfather or my children. So I'm grateful for that. So
oh, me too. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about my grandma. I mean, so no, this was really good, and I'm glad that we had that connection. And I think the people listening to it will
oh,
also
for sure,
feel
for
that,
sure.
and really like inspire them, hopefully, to make some really good decisions for themselves and their
Yeah,
lives based on your work. So I
cool.
really appreciate it.
Thank you again.